The major story of this war, the Ukrainian-Russian war right now, has been the allegation by Russia that there is a biological weapons research facility inside of Ukraine. And this is something that they've come across or their intelligence says is there, etc. And they have denounced the United States for doing so. While at the same time, the United States and the Ukrainian government said that there's no such lab, but then turn around and also say that they're afraid that Russia will get a hold of the laboratory. So it's seemingly a contradictory statement. And this has gone so far as on the 11th, for the UN Security Council, Russia has asked them to look into this allegation that the United States has a biological weapons plant or facility inside of Ukraine near the border with Russia. So now Russia has repeatedly accused the United States of engaging in these experiments, and they've also accused them of carrying out these experiments in Georgia previously. That's a former Soviet state that is very close to Russia, and is also one that the U.S. has been militarily occupying for a great deal of time. And, you know, this is Ukraine. They also, like Ukraine, are aiming to join NATO and be part of the European Union. Even though I'm pretty sure it's actually in Asia, but that's besides the point. The point is, Russia has these allegations of biological weapons on their borders held by their enemy, that being the United States and NATO. Now, the U.S. has denied these accusations, but then has also made some very strange comments about being concerned that Russia will be able to get a hold of them and then allegedly carry out a biological attack. Now, it was Victoria Nuland. She is an American diplomat currently serving as the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs in the United States, has acknowledged to some degree or another that they in fact exist.
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which in fact we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
Now, this video, which is being highly touted as proof of the biological weapons program, is not exactly a direct admission. There's no admission of a weapons program. There is admission of a research program. Now, every country, well, almost every country in the world has some kind of biological research program, because everybody's looking into biological, not just biological weapons, but possible viruses and stuff like that, as we saw with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, who had been carrying out great studies of the coronavirus. But what is suspicious is that that a series of documents have gone missing from Ukraine's website. In other words, there was a list of these programs, these biological programs. Now, the information in them, the website is still there. Now, there's been some confusion because the website was moved. So some people who went to them found that they were gone, but in fact, they had just changed to another address. What is missing is a series of documents about 11 pentagram-funded biolaboratories in Ukraine. Now, it is very suspicious that if you were not doing anything wrong, that you would remove a bunch of documents that were there previously, about 2021. Now, like I said, it's the fact sheet that's missing, not the actual website itself. You can go back into the Wayback Machine and see the website, but it's the documents that are missing. Now NATO supporters are taking this claim that the website is down and using that to blow it up as pro-Russian people are lying and spreading disinformation about the biological program. Well, see, the problem is, yeah, the website was removed and they're using that to excuse anything else that gets said. But what's important is the missing documents, which, thanks to an investigative journalist, those documents are still available, and I will be able to link you to them. So, my question is this. Although we do not have absolute proof that there is a bioweapons program in Ukraine controlled by the United States, I will ask you this. If nothing is going on, why remove these documents? That in itself is a very suspicious act. Well, here's another question. If it's not a bioweapons program, why are they so concerned about Russia getting a hold of it? If this is regular biological research that every country already does, which including Russia itself, then what's the harm in them getting it? And then they allege that they're going to turn it into weapons to use against Ukraine. There's kind of a disconnect here. So they're afraid of them getting a hold of something that they already have. But if they were getting a hold of something they didn't have, in order to turn it into a biological weapon, it takes a long time to research and create these weapons. And they're not something you do overnight. There's a reason why they're multi-million and sometimes multi-billion-dollar projects. So this idea, it's not a weapon, but if Russia gets a hold of it, then it is a weapon. So you could see that the internal logic of this whole thing is kind of messed up. But it does make sense if it is a biological weapons program. Which is why they're turning around and saying that Russia is going to use a biological weapon attack, which sounds very much like the oft-repeated lie about the chemical weapon attack inside of Duma in Syria. Well, actually more than one, where the investigators from the OPCW, at least 4 of them, have come forward saying that the final report did not match their findings. So it was very clearly politically distorted in order to serve U.S. imperialist narrative. So this, you could see how all of this adds up to something very strange and doesn't really make much sense in the context of there being no weapons. But if there is weapons, then all of this does make sense. But it must be repeated. There is no definitive proof that this is a biological weapons program. But what's interesting is that they're going to claim Russia is going to do it, which is strange because the U.S. has a very long history of using biological and chemical weapons. Too many to even list here. But the thing is, what would Russia actually gain from using a biological weapon attack? Absolutely nothing. They would just get complete condemnation. And it's not even necessary to carry out such an attack. They're not in a desperate situation where they're the verge of failure or whatever excuse you would use. It would literally serve them no good. They're already winning as it is. And this would essentially elicit nothing but condemnation from the international arena, which Putin has, frankly, already not done a very good job of collecting or fostering in general. So there really is no reason for Russia to carry out a biological attack. So all of that seems very suspicious to me. Now, it should be noted that there are U.S. biofacilities that are funded by the Defense Threat Reduction Agency under a $2.1 billion U.S. military program. The Cooperative Biological Engagement Program is located on multiple locations in the former Soviet Union countries such as Georgia, Ukraine, the Middle East, East Asia, and Africa. So these biological programs do in fact exist on paper and in reality that are owned by the United States. Now, information from the U.S. Federal Contracts Registry clarifies that some of the military activities at the Lugar Center, among them are research bioagents, anthrax, tularemia, and viral diseases such as the Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, and a collection of biological samples for future experiments. So, on what we have to do, because we do not have any definitive proof in either case. Now, the burden of proof is on Russia to prove these accusations that they've made against the United States for having biological weapons. And this is what logic would tell us. They're the ones that have to prove it, because they're the ones making the accusation. But we do know that the United States has a very long history of creating biological weapons and using them, many on their own black population. So to say that it's something the U.S. would never do because according to people who are ardent supporters of NATO, the United States is a bastion of human rights. A very questionable thing to believe in light of much of the proof that exists to the contrary. But we do have to acknowledge this, given that everything is circumstantial at this point. It would seem reasonable that a lot of people would come to the conclusion that the U.S. does have a bioweapons facility inside of Ukraine. All of the circumstantial evidence does add up. And the fact that the U.S. does have a biological weapons program and has had a biological weapons program for, God knows how long, and that it's ongoing today, and Congress still approves funding for it through the military. So while we cannot definitively prove that there is any kind of chemical weapon facility inside of Ukraine controlled by the United States, we do know such programs exist in other countries, and there is very much proof of them. So until we know for sure, this is something that you're going to have to decide for yourself. Take a look at the evidence for yourself and come to your own conclusion. Just keep in mind the history of the United States government.